Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Fall ADRC meeting. My name is Hannah Rosentrader, and I am the Events and Collaborations Manager at NAC, the National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center. Hi, thank you. Nice to see all of your friendly faces here in Boston this morning, as well as online. And we actually have our largest conference ever. We officially passed the 1,100 participants mark. So thank you so much for all of your support and interest in these ADRC meetings. It just continues to grow, and we're very thankful. We couldn't do this without the support of NIA, the incredible ADRC program. All of the committees and collaborators that help organize these sessions put a ton of work and thought into them. And of course, to Bright AV and our amazing NAC team. So if we can just start out with giving them some love with a round of applause. Yes, thank you all. So today, I'm excited to kick off our first half of the day with a couple of sessions being organized by the OR Core and Neuropathology Core steering committees. These sessions center around the theme of brain donation. The OR Core session and special session on brain donation will kick us off today, and they will be back-to-back with no break in between, just carrying forward that momentum. So a couple of things before we begin. Please silence your devices. And then many of our sessions today will include Q&A. We have microphones in each of the aisles for folks to line up if you have a question, and there is time allotted for it. If you are online, we have next to the chat, you can toggle on the Q&A box and put your question in there. One of our NAC representatives in the room will read your question aloud to the panelists or speaker. And then I guess those are all my housekeeping announcements. So get settled in, and without further ado, I'd love to welcome to the stage Dr. Dorothy Farrar-Edwards. Dr. Edwards is the leader of the Wisconsin ADRC OR Core and the outgoing chair of the OR Core Steering Committee. Welcome, Dorothy.
Thanks, Hannah. Before we get started, our first session is really going to focus on issues associated with retention, followed by our collaborative session with the Neuropath Core, because brain donation is the ultimate mark of retention, right? But I have a couple of things I'd like to say. So first of all, I want to thank Hannah Rosenstrader, without whom none of the steering committees could function. She keeps us organized. She's amazing. So thank you, Hannah. I also want to thank our outgoing steering committee members, Sophia Wang and Emily Largent. Sorry, brain fog there. They've served really well. A lot of the activities that we've done in the past year are because of their hard work. And I want to thank every OR Core leader, every OR Core staff member for all the calls, the newsletters, the meetings, everything that keeps our retention and recruitment activities going. And so I know a lot of you are online, and I just want to thank you for all your hard work. So our session, the first session is really focused on retention, and so we have three great speakers. Dr. Darby Moorhart is going to be talking about the retention pathway, addressing challenges in longitudinal study participation. Darby is the director of the Northwestern University ADRC OR Core, and she serves on the steering committee. Annalise Rahman-Filipiak is a new member of the steering committee. She just got elected. She's from the University of Michigan. She co-leads the OR Core at the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And her presentation is going to be on strategies for retaining diverse participants, building relationships at the individual, family, and community level. And we have a very special speaker today. Dr. Alex G. Is going to be talking about community perspectives on effective partnerships. Now, I could spend the entire morning talking about Dr. G, but I won't. Just briefly, he's the CEO and founder of the Center for Black Excellence in Culture in Madison, Wisconsin. He leads a program called Nehemiah, which is really invested in providing support and services to the Black community in Madison. He just received a $1 million grant from the School of Medicine and Public Health, the University of Wisconsin, to address health equity issues in the community. And he is the chair of our Black Leaders for Brain Health program. So he's a really essential part of our activities at the University of Wisconsin, and we're really pleased that he took time from his schedule to come be with us. And our moderator today is Dr. Monica Parker. She's the director of the Emory-Gozioto ADRC OR Core and the Minority Engagement Course. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way and let the panel start. So, Darby?
Thank you, Dorothy, and good morning, everyone. I appreciate being invited to speak about our retention pathway. We all know in this room that the success of our research is dependent on retention. And we also understand in this room, I think, that the path to retaining persons in longitudinal research is fraught with challenges. And there can be anything from transportation issues to family crises to a host of barriers that get in the way. So at our center, we have always provided what we've called a therapeutic encounter for newly enrolled patients and family participants. And social workers meet with our newly enrolled patients and families to do an ecologically based psychosocial assessment. We look at stressors, look at family resiliency, and we also assess for the need for support, counseling, education, and resources. In recent years, though, we've been having some more conversations with clinical core research assistants who wanted more training on how to manage times when the participants that they were seeing for their annual visits became emotional, like angry, sad, crying, tired of the testing, frustrated. And they would voice these complicating psychosocial factors that the families would bring to them. And we're saying that, this, I think, is threatening their ability to continue to participate in the research. And these research assistants were feeling pretty helpless on how to respond to this. So we would provide this ad hoc intervention over time for many years. But it was in 2019 that we decided to formalize our process by developing a psychosocial pathway for retention purposes, and we have now called it our retention pathway, and I will describe how we've implemented that into our center. So, moving forward. So it starts with training. So we've developed a retention pathway seminar series training that we have developed and refined over time. It's been a cooperative effort of our OR Core team, including our senior community engagement coordinator and the clinical core. And this retention pathway seminar series training is for the research participant facing staff. We use didactic presentations, applied improvisational training by our assistant director of the OR Core, Lauren Dowden. And we also have panel discussions to not only go over the referral process to the retention pathway, but to also talk about risk situations that families face and non-risk areas of concern. And we offer also training working with a diverse cohort, enhancing communication and coping with strong emotions within the setting, and then also brain donation. So we're training our staff to recognize what may be normative stressors and how to respond to them. Thanks to our data core, Debbie Zemlock, who created a red cap process for managing the retention pathway data. This has been formalized in our infrastructure, and we've received 113 referrals, and 31% have been from underrepresented groups. And you can see the referral types here, and while all of these are retention issues, kind of specifically retention, reduced availability, they're having difficulty with transportation, or other life stressors, or reduced interest in research participation, not feeling like what does this matter? How am I benefiting from this, and what difference does it make? Also feeling the time commitment and that burden of that, and then reduced interest in the study activity itself, not wanting to go through that testing again or the imaging. There's also referrals that we receive from families and participants who have high depression scores, express a lot of anxiety or caregiver burden. There's also the questions around access to resources, and then also brain donation. So I have a few retention pathway examples. One is a 93-year-old man who had been in our clinical core since 2005. He began as a normal, control, or healthy, non-cognitively impaired person. But over the course of participation in our clinical core, he was changed to a mild cognitive impairment. And during one annual visit by phone, the study partner, his daughter, discussed how her father was experiencing a steep decline in cognition and function due to a lengthy hospitalization for aspiration pneumonia. The participant had long ago indicated an intent for brain donation. The RAs requested medical records, but the RA had difficulty contacting the daughter and became concerned that we'd lost contact. So they referred this person to the social work team, and we were able then to reach the daughter, who was very overwhelmed and burdened with her father's increased care needs. We provided caregiving resources, obtained medical records, and then confirmation that the daughter would follow through with her father's wishes regarding brain donation. Another example is a 68-year-old woman who enrolled in 2015 with a diagnosis of FTD. She and her husband live in another state. The RA had much difficulty reaching the husband, and it was almost at the end of the study window when she finally spoke with him. He expressed much distress and disappointment from medical professionals. He was feeling very alone and on the brink of ending research participation because he was too overwhelmed with his wife's care. The RA reached out to the social work team as a retention pathway, and we contacted the husband, and were able to reach him, provided supportive counseling, and linked him to helpful resources in his area. We emphasized our ongoing availability as a center, and then facilitated a reconfirmation of brain donation. And then lastly, and this is one that I received just a couple of weeks ago, a 62-year-old woman caring for her husband with primary progressive aphasia. She scored very highly on the depression scale. This is someone who had been known to the center for the last 5 years, and she's been caring for her husband during this time. The social worker reached out, and the wife described that not only was she losing her husband to this PPA and dementia, that her daughter had become estranged due to some past family conflict. And she shared that she was losing a sense of identity, as a wife and a mom, and described suicidal ideation. And she was connected with resources then in her city, and we maintained contact until the loop was closed and she was connected to psychiatric services. So some of our other retention practices are, we have psychosocial initiatives such as the Buddy Program, we have monthly care partner support groups, but I think our phone call onlys most directly focus on retention by focusing on supporting the caregiving family when the person is no longer testable or able to come to the center. So we do about 30 of those per year, and we secure confirmation of brain donation and address psychosocial concerns. We also speak to families about advanced care planning, palliative care, and hospice, and reinforce our ongoing availability. So in conclusion, research participation, again, as we all know, is very, very challenging. Retention is very challenging. And we think then we've been testing that this retention pathway is a method of providing the individualized attention to participants and families. And it reinforces a reciprocity of support over time. I mean, they are giving to us, and we are giving back. Thank you. Oh, I would like to acknowledge my assistant director, Lauren Dowden, our clinical core manager, our data core manager, and also, although Phyllis is no longer at our center, she was our senior community engagement coordinator, had a huge role, especially in discussing retention of underrepresented groups. Thank you.
And now welcome to the stage Dr. Annalise Rahman-Filipiak from Michigan ADRC for strategies for retaining diverse participants, building relationships at the individual, family, and community level.
Thanks so much, and good morning. So I'm really excited to join you from the Michigan ADRC. I just recently became co-lead of our ORCOR along with Scott Robert, so really excited to be here today to talk about some of the strategies we use. At the Michigan ADRC, we feel very lucky that approximately 30% of our longitudinal cohort are Black or African American older adults. We also have a growing Latino cohort, a project that's spearheaded by Irving Vega and other colleagues. So this is a really critical question to us. When we think about retaining diverse participants, we often think about building relationships, not only at the individual level with our participants, but also with their family members and their communities. But how do we go about building those relationships? As a clinical psychologist, I will say that I think that the building blocks are very similar to the same blocks we use to build our individual personal relationships. So two themes that I want to talk about in my 10 minutes here are sustained personal connections and later more about communication. So we have heard from participants at this very meeting that one of the barriers to recruitment and retention is feeling like they are just a data point or a number, right? Instead, we want to see our participants as vibrant individuals with their own lives, much going on outside of their research participation. At Michigan, we try to do that in a range of different ways that range from the very small, including things like sending out birthday, holiday, and even bereavement cards. This is one small way that we can have multiple touch points throughout the year, but also recognize that we celebrate with and sometimes grieve with our participants. Additionally, we do this in bigger ways, like our annual appreciation luncheon, which I think I speak for many of the Michigan folks and probably others here that this kind of event is one of our favorites throughout the year. We just had our appreciation luncheon a few weeks ago, so the pictures you see here are a representation of that. We invite all of our longitudinal cohort participants to come and have a meal with us. We invite all of our staff members so they can interact more with our participants, and we have several offerings as part of the program, including we started this year with a mindfulness activity to really ground the kind of culture of what we were doing. We had an expert panel answer questions, and perhaps the most moving part for many of us is the naming of a community champion. This is someone or a group of individuals who has gone far beyond the role of a research participant. So often, they are really leveraging the trust and the social credit they've built through many, many years and often decades out in the community to open doors for us, not only to bring participants to the study, but also to bring us out into the community, into the spaces where we need to listen. When we think about building those community relationships, I think a potential missed opportunity is better collaboration with our RICMARs, who are truly the experts in this space. At Michigan, we are incredibly lucky because we have two well-established RICMARs, the Michigan Center for Urban African American Aging Research, that is largely housed in Detroit, and the Michigan Center for Contextual Factors in Alzheimer's Disease. We've set up a regular meeting where all of our centers sit and talk together about our community-engaged research practices, what's working, what's maybe unique to our populations versus more universal. And that actually has turned into significant changes in what we do, as well as some really fantastic science as featured here. We additionally try to partner very closely with community organizations themselves. So not only with those organizations focused on dementia, but also with some of these partnerships and organizations that exist out in the community more broadly. One that I want to talk about is our partnership with the Eastside Community Network, which is a really fantastic and longstanding organization in Detroit. And I find that these organizations are the ones that really have their finger on the pulse of the economic, social, political, environmental priorities for the community, and again, really open those doors. But when we think about those partnerships, I think we can do so more creatively. Certainly, we have opportunities to go out to these organizations and give an educational talk or do some outreach. But I also think there's a chance for us to share the particular skills that we have with these organizations. So for instance, one thing that we have done in the past is partner with some of these community organizations around grant writing, something that hopefully we're okay at. And that's one way that we can really help boost them in a kind of non-traditional way. When we think about the building blocks of strong relationships, part of it is a sustained presence. Many of you are familiar with the term ghosting, the idea of rapidly disappearing with no explanation from a relationship. I want to say that we are sometimes guilty of that as centers. We sometimes go into the community, helicopter in, collect data or share a bit of information, and then disappear. So how do we become more sustained in these relationships? The numbers that I have here reflect some of the talks that we've given just in the past year, and you can see kind of the distribution throughout the state. But I think we have to think strategically about not just broadening where we reach out to, but also ensuring that we have the infrastructure and the ability to keep up these relationships once they're formed. One thing I'd also like to highlight is that in addition to those traditional educational events, we do a range of other outreach activities that allow our staff, our faculty, our trainees to interact more naturally with community members. We know from a lot of research that many of us do those implicit bias trainings, and those are important, but one of the best ways to identify and address our own biases is just to interact naturally with people that are different from us. And so I think that's a big part of our cultural humility. One of the activities I like to feature is in that middle picture, we have Liel Davis, who's one of our newer fantastic community navigators. She and several other folks from our team have gone out to the Detroit Riverwalkers group and go out weekly and just walk the riverfront with some of our participants, which again gives us an idea of the lives they lead, what's important to them, and just more of an opportunity to build a relationship. So in addition to sustained personal connections, we care a lot about iterative and bi-directional communication, another key piece of relationship building. I'm going to try not to spend a lot of time here. Many of you know that this is my passion, return of research results, so you've heard me talk about this before. But what I really want to emphasize here is that we know now participants want their data back, and it is our responsibility to build the infrastructure to allow that, which is not easy. At Michigan, we developed a feedback process and then completely destroyed it and started again. So a couple of years ago, we overhauled that process such that now we are able to give cognitive and diagnostic feedback to participants every year at every evaluation. We are additionally working to bring amyloid and tau imaging results, structural MRI, and certainly everyone gets feedback from their brain autopsy. That requires us to think about how to do this efficiently and be very creative in this process. And we're proud that to date we have done over 1,500 feedback visits and 500 in the last year. But we can't stop there. Feedback is only part of it. It's only useful if we provide the pathways to our participants for them to access the resources that they need. So I hearken back to Darby's really wonderful presentation, thinking about the next steps after research. So often we get this question of, okay, thanks for that information, but what do my family and I do now? Built into our feedback process, and as part of our ORCOR, we have really developed pathways for this information to be leveraged for personalized study selection. We also have created pathways for our participants post-feedback to access educational resources, support through our wellness programming, and the same sorts of resources for their care partners. So again, seeing participants not only as individuals, but as part of a family. And then like many of the other centers, we are not embedded in a clinic, which presents unique challenges in terms of accessing specialty care. We have spent a lot of time developing geographic specific resources for our participants that help bridge the gap between research and the clinic. In addition to giving information, it's important that we're constantly looking for it as well. So part of incorporating and asking for feedback is leveraging our community advisory boards. We have 2 advisory boards, the Detroit Advisory Council and a Lived Experience Advisory Panel. But we have really, again, turned to our RICMAR colleagues because they have fantastic models for how they build and work with their community advisory boards. So some of the things we do is really develop a collaborative method for defining roles, constantly revisiting that over time, providing training for our CAB members so that they are able to have a significant impact on what we're doing and feel empowered to do so, allowing opportunities for them to provide input on grants, program development, events. In fact, one of the things that we're thinking about more and more is how the CAB can interact with our rec trainees, both to provide community engaged research training to those trainees, but also so that the CAB has a really direct relationship with the next stage, the next generation of researchers. I also want to feature one particular project that we've been working on. I know the next session is about brain donation, and I'm very excited to hear more about that because, like many centers, that's an important target for us. We heard loud and clear from our participants that brain donation is kind of mysterious and a little scary and needs to be demystified, so we've been working on a brain donation video. One of our wonderful CAB members, who is very public and one of our greatest supporters, agreed to be part of this video, not only to share her own reasons for engaging in brain donation and signing up for that, but also her experience as a study partner for her sister, who donated her brain a couple of years ago. This gave us a real fantastic opportunity to hear directly from our participants what was scary about the process, but also what was powerful and important. The last thing I want to talk about is that iterative part of the communication. We have to constantly be looking for opportunities to improve or be flexible in our procedures. I know we have a lot of asks as centers. We have a lot of things that we have to accomplish, but we also have to build in some room for flexibility that allows for this retention. So one of the projects I want to feature just briefly is spearheaded by our wonderful ORCOR manager, Teresa Gierzinski, who's sitting over there. In collaboration with Jen Lingler and colleagues at Pitt, she developed a survey that goes out to participants after their annual evaluation to understand perceived burden. We found that overall perceived burden is pretty low. However, among a subset of participants, there are greater experiences of psychological burden, concerns about confidentiality and trust, as well as physical burden or logistic burden, transportation issues. So again, many of the things that Darby just mentioned in her talk as well. That gives us some really direct action items to address. Other growth opportunities include fasting blood draw. We heard loud and clear people don't love that, so we've been able to flex the schedule of that. And again, we hear this pretty common theme from our participants that many of the procedures that are described in our consent form are completely mysterious. Our consent forms are pretty lengthy, and so we have really started developing the idea of staff recording short videos in lay language that explain each of these procedures and could be shared at the time of recruitment or even before then. The other benefit of doing that is that staff then become familiar and recognizable faces when our participants come in to see us. So again, in thinking about building relationships at all of these levels, the two things we emphasize are these sustained personal connections, seeing the participant as a whole person in the context of their community and their culture, as well as this iterative bidirectional communication that involves a lot of humility. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our fantastic ORCOR team, many of whom are playing so many different roles. We also have some fantastic trainees as part of this team who are going to be applying to graduate school programs or medical school programs, so I might be contacting some of you. But I want to really recognize them because they do the vast majority of our work. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Raman Filipiak. Up next, we have Dr. Alex G. Dr. G is going to be presenting on community perspectives on effective partnerships. He is the CEO and founder of the Center for Black Excellence in Culture in Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here. And I also want to appreciate Wisconsin's ADRC for inviting me as a community partner to talk with you today about a community perspective and also as a personal perspective on the work that you're doing. But before that, I just want to say that I could imagine that sitting where you sit and you're wearing the shoes that you do, that sometimes this feels like thankless work, like it's not enough, it's not fast enough. But I want to take a moment, just as a person whose mother succumbed to Alzheimer's early this year, thank you for your commitment to this research. Thank you for thinking about how we bring underrepresented groups in, and thank you for staying the course, because we know that it's not enough, it's not fast enough, but I want you to know that your work is appreciated, and we want you to keep doing what you're doing. When I did discover that my mom had Alzheimer's, I became her medical power of attorney immediately. I'm her only son and oldest child. I was invited to dinner at the home of Dr. Carrie Gleason, and we talked about just this whole world of ADRC and what's happening and the research that's going on. And I told her, I'm not interested in being a part of another committee where we're just asked, how do we bring more Black people to you? Or as Madison's longest serving faith leader, how do we come to your congregation to talk with more Black people about memory issues? I want to impact the science. I want to help to co-write papers. I want to help interpret the data. I don't merely want to be a messenger. I want to be a participant, because if this science had moved further along, perhaps my mother wouldn't be in the situation that she is in. And so she and I are the co-founders of that. When I'm not attending Black Leaders for Brain Health committee meetings that we have regularly, and Dr. Sanjay Asana and Dr. Sterling Johnson attend those meetings regularly to speak to our group, I'm what's called a social innovator. I like to create spaces, organizations, facilities that bring together people, particularly Black people, to study the cross-section of culture, theology, belonging, and how it has an amazing impact on well-being. I live in a community where we put $500 million into human services each year. Respect that, and we need it, but not enough attention on what prevents these things. And so I love to think about how do we help Black people not merely survive, but actually thrive. And so I spent years surveying and talking with 700 Black people in our community, my community. These are in face-to-face meetings. This is prior to COVID. And just asking, what helps us to thrive? I don't know if you realize this or not, but currently in America, we are having the greatest migration of Black people from the North back to the South in American history. And much of it has to do with the lack of representation and the lack of promotions and upward mobility. What we're still finding among Black influencers in Madison, Wisconsin, is that in 2024, many of us are still the first and the only. And that brings about a level of stress that impacts health. And I know I'm singing to the choir here, but just everyday living, not even looking at health issues, just navigating, choosing a facility for my mom where someone may look like her, cook like her. Do they have art on the wall that reflects her? And will this be a place where she will spend her glory years, her sunsetting days, in a place where she either belongs or will continue to be an interloper. That in itself causes stress in our communities. And when I asked our community members, and this is at a recent event that my center put together, I'll talk about that in just a moment, they said a number of things. They said, we're tired of being guinea pigs. We're tired of our children being studied as problems needing to be fixed. We want our children to be developed as leaders, and we want our parents who built this country to be able to live a good life, to get older without all of the degenerative diseases that we just sort of shrug off and just say that's just part of being black or brown or people of color in this community. You may not know this, but Wisconsin, particularly the county that I'm from, Dane County, where Madison is housed, has the greatest disparity, racial disparity in the entire country. 4th and 8th grade reading levels and math levels, mass incarceration, black infant mortality rate, real estate, high school dropout, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Every day I can read a report on how I am dying more quickly than my white counterpart, but I can rarely pick up something that tells me how we turn that around. And this is what black people said. We want space so that we can come together and not feel like outsiders and celebrate our culture and thrive in a way that we did in a separate but equal society, because we have black teachers, doctors, nurses, others that are working in our community. We want to bring back that cultural reinforcement. And so I listened to what they said, and I put together a plan so that we designed Wisconsin's first Center for Black Excellence in Culture. It was a place that it's a 37,000 square foot design. We found a company with a black architect. We interviewed over 100 black influencers, from physicians to educators, to business owners, to state workers, to those who were formerly incarcerated, to 20-something Madison-born and raised black individuals, to put together this design. It would be a space where black people can come and thrive and not escape the real world, but to exhale so that we can engage it more powerfully. And we want a place where we can come and our children can learn about college prep and can learn about foreign languages and learn about chamber music and orchestra music. We can have black performances and comics coming in to talk to us, and lectures and book festivals. That we would have a place where we could celebrate who we are and have a greater sense of belonging, because if nothing else, the pandemic taught us that isolation leads to premature death. It makes us more prone to illness, and that's just life for people of color in America. We focused on black culture, not just African American culture, but we want to focus on those from the African diaspora, folks who are African, those who identify as Afro-Latino, folks who are Caribbean, and of course North American blacks. I pulled on the strengths of black women in our community who designed our campaign and made sure that our first 300 donors were black people in order to kick this off. And this has become important to me because we want to be a part of the solution. This became very personal to me because my mother and one of my heroes, who I told you succumbed to Alzheimer's on January 1st of this year, is my hero. She dropped out of high school. She was a sharecropper, which means that my mother picked cotton for a living, which means I'm not just the first black college graduate after my mom, but I'm the first generation in my family that has not picked cotton for a living in the United States of America. She dropped out of high school her freshman year because America didn't know what to do with a brilliant, intellectual black woman in Chicago, Illinois. But she took the entrance exam in 1970, going through a divorce. She was 30, she had 2 young kids, and was admitted immediately. She dropped out because she remarried and just got in with her regular life. And when I was a junior in college, I dared my mother to come back to college with me. My mom and I had 3 classes together. She graduated a semester before I did. She won a full fellowship to graduate school to get her master's degree in social work. She practiced as a family therapist and helped me start my first nonprofit and served as our family therapist. And so when she developed Alzheimer's, it broke my heart because her most prized possession, besides her faith in her family, was her brain. And it made me start thinking. You know, when she gave birth to me in 1963, the Marshall in Washington was only 72 days old. She didn't know what the world would hold for her children. She held stress every day of her life. I don't have the data on it, but I'm almost certain, my gut tells me, that that has something to do with women her age, men her age, who are succumbing to Alzheimer's, who are coming of that age right now. And so what I thought was, I want to do something in her honor. Inside our space, I want to create an elder space where we will focus on celebrations and intergenerational connections, and we will work on a center for Black elders and excellence within that space, where there'll be volunteer engagement. They can mentor youth, provide health settings. But what I want is not just a place for her to be tested, but I want there to be a place for Black families and Black elders to go and celebrate and have cross-cultural, intergenerational interactions, and to discover its impact on not only Alzheimer's, but the prevention of it. We want a place where they can learn about nutrition and exercise and take field trips and really feel that they have a place to go to live and not just die. I'm working with leaders at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to look at how we can have Black-led research, where we will invite the community to come in and design what it is we want to study, and we would invite the ADRC in, and not the other way around, to come and help us to study what Black people want to learn and know about ourselves, and to create science that's based in the community, a partnership between the community and researchers. To date, I've raised $30 million for this endeavor. We only need $32 million for a completely debt-free facility. We broke ground 3 weeks ago. We're going to open in November of 2025. Nothing like it exists in the state of Wisconsin or in the Midwest that's rooted, initially funded and supported in the Black community. And what I want us to really focus on is Black thriving. Because if we can attain this, then we can see health changes. And I want to invite the ADRC in Wisconsin. I want to invite the broader community to come in and help us to document not only how these interactions impact people with Alzheimer's, but how it might prevent it for the children and the youth and the others who are participating in this space also. I'm over time, but thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you on things that we can do from the community's perspective, where the community invites you in and not the other way around. We want to see what impact that will have on the study of Black brain health.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dr. G.
Thank you all for those fantastic presentations. We get to a point right now where we have our question and answers. So for persons who have questions for our panelists, you have microphones, 1, 2, 3 that I can see. So, questions for the panel?
We do have one from online, if we
Okay.
can start with that. So Elizabeth Rodas asks, these are fantastic strategies for engagement. Do the speakers have suggestions or insights for sustained funding mechanisms to support ongoing community outreach, as building relationships and sustaining takes substantial time and effort?
Okay, I guess that's for the first two speakers. Annalise?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's an excellent question, and one that we all, it's a challenge for all of us. I would say that there are a lot of, I think the NIH has really heard this call significantly, and there are several funding mechanisms specific to building community partnerships, building those sustained sort of connections. Additionally, I would say, we have had some success in gaining state funding for this kind of purpose. But again, I think it's about going to your community partners and also understanding what their larger needs are as centers or as community organizations, and collaboratively writing grants that might help fund several of their different efforts at the same time. Because again, it's not just about this research in this very specific space, but also much broader priorities for the community.
Barbie?
Well, I echo what Annalise is saying here, and I just want to add that we have some philanthropic assistance as well, and very much appreciated. We also have social work embedded in our center because it's embedded in our neurobehavior and memory clinic, from where a lot of our patients and family participants come from. And so we have that social work support, and we just spread it throughout the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center.
Dr. G?
I'll just say there's no lack of money, and with building this center, I've become a fundraiser. That's not my life or background or calling, but what I realize is when a vision is compelling, money will follow it. And so I think rather than getting all tied up worrying about money, we need to think about our strategies and if they are appealing.
Thank you. Any others? I guess we don't have any online from the audience. Okay, I have one, and it's for Darby. How did you get your training of your research coordinators started? Because I think a lot of our coordinators come from backgrounds where they're not necessarily empathetic, they're not social workers, so how did you start that? I mean, I think that kind of coordinator training is really important.
Thinking back, how did we, I think it was, we have monthly meetings with our clinical core and the OR core. And a lot of times in those meetings, there's discussion around retention and examples of discussions with families that have been particularly difficult that they've had. And it was through those that we just started to have more and more discussions about how they might be able to approach them. So it was pretty informal. We have an amazing group of research assistants, I think as many of you do, who are really bright young people who are often going off to medical school themselves and PhD doctoral programs in psychology. And I think that tapping into kind of that natural intellect and also the curiosity and the empathy that is there. Another part of this, we do have the buddy program, which is pairing first-year medical students with people living with dementia. We've been offering that to our research assistants, and some have been participating in that, and that is a very natural way to develop empathic responses to families.
Thank you. Lisa? No, Dr. Baker.
Hi, Laura Baker from Wake Forest. First of all, thank you for it was a very nice presentation and set of talks this morning. My question, it's not really a question, I just would love to have more of a conversation with Dr. G. Really fantastic, inspiring efforts that you're doing, making the progress that you're making in the community to make a strong show of resilience and power. And so I think that's the message that I got loud and clear, that we need to turn our attention to resilience. And in all the work that we do, how to highlight the specialness of resilience of our Black community, our communities where they're people of color, and not just talk about how to take care of the health issues. So I thought maybe could we have a couple more minutes of your time for you to talk to us about where you are in terms of your thinking about resilience and what work we can do to move in that direction.
You want that right now?
Yes, is that okay? We've got time here. We've got such a valuable person right here on the stage, and I would like to hear.
I'm gonna let you have a minute.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm gonna let you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that, and thank you for that question and for those comments. What I'm really coming to appreciate, and I'm really seeing this embodied in my colleague, Dr. Carrie Gleason, is that this is not just about what we learned from the ADRCs, but what has sustained Black people in America for 500 years. And have we studied those? Have we evaluated them? Have we given them clinical terms? Have we given them value in the academy? Because these are things that keep us going way before. Black people are a lot older than the ADRC. And so how do we bring that into the academy to help you be better? Because if this is partnership, if you don't understand how I make you better, then it's not a partnership. I teach partnership theory. And so one is understanding we have these things to bring, but also understanding what you lose when this takes place. When my mom was passing, it occurred to me to perhaps call the members of the ADRC to talk about a brain donation. But I'm also a pastor where people have asked me for 30 years to survey our Black people. They don't use the money to hire Black graduate students. They don't even bring the data back to our church to help us to lead better. And so I felt that it was unfair to give my mother's Black brain to science when they're still saying we can't find Black people. There are 40 million Black people in America, more than at any time in world history, 20 more than when I came into the world. And we're still saying we can't find them. And at that moment, I made a very gut-wrenching decision, and that was probably controversial what I'm saying. I wanted to, but I felt that I was dishonoring my mom to do that for folks who don't find ways to partner with us. So when I approached Dr. Sanjay and Dr. Sterling Johnson, I said, this was what I felt, but this is what I can do. Can we study Black health initiatives where Black people get to shape it? It's housed in our center. We bring Black researchers in, and can we talk about what's sustaining us and helping us to live, like our music, our culture, our celebrations? Those are things that didn't just help us overcome hard times. That's how Black people, people of African descent, traveled and how we interacted with the world. Can we study the impact of that, not only in elders, but in middle-aged adults and kids? Can we show, if it's true, that cultural impacts, social gatherings, cultural celebrations, art, music, dance can actually have an impact on Black wellness? And if so, can we change the way we think about the science? And these are the conversations we're engaging now.
Thank you.
Time for one more. Sudha Seshadri, South Texas ADRC. And again, like others, I want to thank all of you for the very important presentations. And I have a question, I guess, to whoever, but especially Dr. Z. I found your vision so compelling. And it is extremely true that your mother, for instance, even as her illness advanced, had so much of value in terms of her memory, lived experience, knowledge to share. And I think one of the things we are all collectively trying to emphasize is that dementia is a chronic illness, but that does not take away who you are and your strengths. You know, there was a PhD in organic chemistry, even as she knows much more than I ever will. And one question, the Community Advisory Board, for instance, I found that wonderful. Do we have people with early disease there, reviewing the science like they do in UK and some other things? And for instance, in the cultural center, when we have programs, the illness in a person or in a loved one often leads to intensification of loneliness and isolation. And one solution, of course, is to have people like the buddies or even our graduate students come and volunteer to provide that extra support so that a group of patients and spouses, for instance, attend these programs that you talked about. And I wondered if you had some insights on how to make it possible for the dyads to enjoy many of these facilities and opportunities. So I guess it's to both of you, for the Community Advisory Board as well as for the Cultural Center. We are trying to incorporate some of those into the medical facility itself, a center of brain health that we are building, where we have a music room, an art room, and other things, because that's so important to keep that and to continue this aspect of rehabilitating, recovering functions as best as we can, even as we treat it with drugs.
I think I want to maybe recognize something that I'm hearing from your comment that's really important, which is this idea that life extends, rich, important, wonderful life extends beyond a diagnosis for participants, for their families, for their communities. And so a big part of what we've been thinking about, at least locally, is, again, what happens in between our visits and what happens after that feedback visit occurs? How can we build those bridges? And importantly, how can we feature those voices more directly? So we just this year formed our Lived Experience Advisory Panel, our LEAP. And we really had to rethink the way that we even structured those meetings, where they took place, time of day, all of those sorts of things. So I think a big part of it is again, maybe the humility of just being flexible and stumbling through the process initially, really trying to listen to the feedback that we get. A critical piece of that too, I mentioned incorporating feedback. That's not something we can always do. We do get asks from our community advisory boards, from our participants, that for various reasons we're not able to accommodate, but I think that's an opportunity for us to communicate about why. So what are the parameters that are in place that stop that from happening, and what can we offer instead? So, that's one thing that we're working towards. I really loved hearing you share a bit about some of the ways that you've set up your own space to accommodate a really diverse group of individuals in terms of symptoms, experiences, et cetera. I think that's another way that we need to think a bit more creatively about just making this whole process a little easier.
Anna, thank you.
Yes, and we have about 1 minute left, but we do have one final question from Jaime Perales online, and it is, do you think it would be feasible to measure participant burden among those who decide not to participate in a study?
I sort of want to send this question over to Jen Lingler, since she's someone who does this very regularly, like really thinks about it critically. I would say, though, absolutely. Our retention rates at around 80%, but we've really been focused on that other 20% and understanding the reasons why even we lose people to contact, which is challenging. But absolutely, that's exactly what we should be doing, is understanding the reasons for leaving.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, here we are talking about our retention practices and what's successful, but we're also finding there are ways that we're not successful, and we need to talk about those as well. We've been talking about them in our steering committee meetings, and I think that's why we're here at these directors' meetings, is to learn from each other, not just the ways that we're succeeding, but the ways that we really, what we can learn and how we can continue to retain as many people as possible.
Okay, thank you, panel, and thank you for your questions. Next panel.